Can you name 3 different ways to obtain long-term care insurance? Hi, I'm Doug Ray, and I'm the president and founder of the Wealth Guardians and the Ray Financial Group.
And I'm Brice Payne, and you've entered The Vault, the Wealth Guardians video series on all things pertaining to retirement planning. In this episode, we're going to cover odds that you'll need long-term care coverage, who long-term care coverage actually protects, typical cost and stay time, traditional long-term care coverage versus asset-based long-term care coverage versus hybrid life, and then we'll do some case studies. Don't forget to hit these like and subscribe buttons down right here. And Doug, go ahead, let's get to it.
Yeah, let's do, Brice. You know, I'm sure our audience out there would rather us talk about anything but long-term care.
It's a sensitive topic.
Nobody wants to think about it. But the fact of the matter is 70% of us are going to need some form of long-term care in our lifetime, whether it's a rehab situation from a broken hip or it's something far worse like several years in a memory care unit.
Right. Yeah, it's always a sensitive subject, and oftentimes our technique to dealing with something like this is to put the blinders on or to bury our heads in the sand. But if you are wanting to have a sound retirement plan, this is not a topic you can overlook. So Doug, you just talked about the odds that you will need it. 70% of us are going to need some kind of long-term care coverage at some point in our life. Who does long-term care coverage actually protect? Our first instinct would be, well, it protects me.
Yeah.
But it's deeper than that.
So in my years in this business, I can't tell you how many times I've heard somebody say this, well, she's going to take care of me. Well, let me tell you something. If she can't pull you off a toilet now and tuck you in bed, how is she going to do it when you're 80 years old? Long-term care insurance is for your loved one. Yes, it takes care of you, but it takes a lot of stress and relief off the spouse or the daughter or the son, whoever that caregiver may be, because days and weeks and years of taking care of somebody actually can drive their health down as well.
Right. So let's talk, Doug, about typical stay time and cost versus record stay time.
Yeah.
What's a typical stay time that somebody has in a long-term care facility?
So the average is, if it's not memory care related, it runs about 3 years. Either they get better or they go to heaven. The cost in this area is going to run something in the neighborhood, in a nice place, somewhere around $6,000-$7,000 a month. So it's a lot of money. It's
a lot of money. If you're doing that $6,000 or $7,000 a month, perhaps your spouse is not in long-term care, so they still got the house that they have to live in and their food expenses and whatnot.
Exactly.
So that's an additional $6,000 to $7,000. It's not covering both of you.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. So then let's flip that on its head and say, what is the record stay and the record cost that we know of?
Yeah. There was this little lady, I believe she lived in Massachusetts. This has been several years ago. She got early onset dementia, and she was in a memory care unit for something in the neighborhood of 12, 15 years. I don't remember exactly the number of years, but the cost was nearly $2 million for all those years in the facility.
And if the household, the husband and wife only have, say, $1 million assets saved to their name, it's going to deplete that. So what is the spouse who was living in the house, what are they supposed to now live on?
Well, there are some protections, and you need to probably see an attorney to figure out how to get Medicaid involved in a situation like that.
But if you hadn't done that, then it's not a good situation.
Then
for the spouse.
It's a depletion of assets.
Right. That's right. So you're protecting yourself, you're protecting your spouse, and you're protecting the kids. Now, there's 2 main types of long-term care coverage out there, Doug. There's traditional long-term care coverage, and then there's asset-based long-term care coverage. Most people, I think, are familiar with traditional long-term care. If they've ever heard it described to them or they've gone out and had it priced, that's probably the kind that they are familiar with. Tell us what traditional long-term care coverage, tell us how that works, what that looks like.
Well, I like to use the analogy of it's very similar to your automobile policy because it's built on that kind of a chassis. You know, you pay a premium for this coverage for the rest of your life. You get a certain amount of coverage. You can add inflation to it. You know, it's like your automobile insurance. If you never wreck your car, then all those premiums you've paid into it just go poof, gone.
Right.
So if you never get sick with traditional long-term care insurance, then those premiums are poof, gone. By the way, it's expensive. Those long-term care premiums have really gone up over the years.
What's a typical traditional-based long-term care monthly premium?
Well, that's going to depend upon the health of the person who's applying for it. Yeah, and the time that you get it. And by the way, qualifying for long-term care insurance is harder than life insurance. And think about it. The reason for that is you're probably going to need the long-term care insurance before you need the life insurance. But, you know, it depends on the age and the health of the person when they apply for it. And, you know, I don't even want to give a quote right now because it changes daily.
So much. Right, varies so much. All right, so that's your traditional long-term care coverage. And the idea that somebody gets a quote, says, well, I'm spending $100, $200 a month for long-term care coverage that I don't know that I'm ever going to use, and it's gone if I never use it. I think I'll take the risk. But let's now take a look at asset-based long-term care. This works in a completely different way.
It does.
How does this work?
So asset-based insurance means that in some fashion you're going to use this policy. A lot of asset-based policies are a one-time lump sum payment into the policy. You can actually design these things where you can pay for them for over 10 years or 20 years. But let's just use a typical policy where somebody puts in, say, $100,000 premium. That essentially sits in the policy. It's going to earn interest. You can actually reach in there and get that money out if you want to. But what it does is it magnifies those dollars in there for home health and long-term care coverage. A typical 65-year-old couple might put $100,000 into a long-term care annuity, and they might get $300,000 worth of home health and long-term care coverage. If they go through life, they never touch it, then a beneficiary is going to get that original $100,000 plus whatever growth.
So that's one of the key points right there that separates it from traditional long-term care that we were just describing, is asset-based long-term care. That money doesn't disappear if you never needed it. We all like to think that we're going to be healthy up until the last week of our life. We'll be sick in bed for a week, and then we pass away peacefully. That doesn't happen to most of us. So if that does happen to us, what that $100,000 or so that this couple put into a long-term care asset-based policy, that money's going to whoever their beneficiary is.
Exactly.
So they didn't risk it. They didn't risk that money at all if they were just healthy up until the last week of their life. That's a key distraction or deterrent for people, is they just don't want to risk turning that money over and never getting it back. If you have asset-based long-term care, that's not the way it works. So I've actually got an illustration here for a couple that are clients of ours. We'll call them Eva and Chester. Chester's 66, Eva's 65. They wanted to get a policy, an illustration, for $200,000. So that $200,000 is going to pay, whenever the time comes that they might need long-term care, and this is a joint policy, $5,200 a month. Now, they've only put $200,000 in here. If they need long-term care coverage, it's going to pay $5,200 a month for each individual. So somebody might ask, well, what if we both need to go in there? Is it still paying just that $5,200 a month? No, it's paying $5,200 to each individual. Now, if you only need somebody to come in for a few hours a day to cook your meals and you're not in a full-term facility yet, doesn't matter. It's still paying you that $5,200 a month. Now, if you do need to go into a full-time facility, as Doug said earlier on in this episode, that might run you $7,000 or so a month. Well, this is only going to pay $5,200, but that takes a huge bite out of the cost for you. Now, if both people needed care, then that's paying $10,400 a month. So it's doubling up. All right, that's going to cover way more than what you would need, even if you were in a facility. Well, Doug, what about the amount of time? How long is it going to pay that? It's going to pay it for the rest of your life. This is an unlimited policy. Unlimited policies are becoming more rare, but they still do exist. We're based in North Carolina, and they still exist here in North Carolina. And this is the main type of policy that the Wealth Guardians would recommend for a majority of our clients if they are looking to have a long-term care policy. The face value of the policy is, let's say that they passed away and they never needed long-term care. What happens to that $200,000 that they put in there? $173,000 of it is going straight to a beneficiary. So there's very little risk that you're taking in this money not working out at all.
By the way, I'll add this. Those payments are tax-free.
Key point.
Tax-free.
Right. Even if you're not using it all, if you're having somebody come in for a few hours a day to cook your meals, you're still getting $5,000. That's maybe only costing you $2,000 a month. This is paying $5,000. That extra $3,000 you're pocketing as tax-free. How can it not be better than that?
Yeah, pretty good stuff.
All right, Doug, we're wrapping things up here. Let's talk about hybrid life now.
Yeah, this is another way to do it. Congress actually did a real good benefit for us back in, I think it was 2006, under the Pension Protection Act. So hybrid life insurance is basically a life insurance policy that has what we call living benefits. In other words, you take out a life insurance policy on yourself, and if you need home health or long-term care and can't do 2 of the 6 activities of daily living to qualify for them, or are cognitively impaired, then the insurance company is going to let you take some of the death benefit to help cover your costs for long-term care or home health care. And again, that's tax-free. You can use these for cash value life insurance policies. You can use them for even term policies. Although I don't really recommend term policies because term means it ends at some point. Generally, the insurance companies have it figured out that it's going to end before your life does. So you really want some kind of a permanent type policy, whether it's cash value or what we call in this business permanent term, which is called guaranteed universal life. If you think this is an interesting thing out there, I've done several cases in the past where we've taken somebody's old-fashioned life insurance policy that didn't have these living benefits, and we upgraded it into one of these new hybrid policies that do have these living benefits. Now, my wife and I, we have 2 policies, one each of us, that has cash value, it has living benefits, and I'll give you an example of how hers works. She has a death benefit of $600,000. So if something happened and she couldn't do 2 of the 6 activities of daily living and needed either home health or long-term care, then we could go in and we could get 90% of that $600,000 to help pay for her care. So that's a good way to do it, I think.
Absolutely. And that was the case study that you had for this as well. So that's really a breakdown on long-term care coverage, who it protects, who needs it, what it costs, what the record stay times are, traditional long-term care versus asset-based long-term care versus hybrid life, all those things we covered here. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of The Vault. Feel free again to hit these like and subscribe buttons right here and to catch all the future episodes. And remember, the markets aren't going to wait for you. I'm Brice Payne.
And I'm Doug Ray.
This has been The Vault.